The story of Saddam Hussein. Translated into English, if you think burning someone alive is the height of barbarity, hold on, because the living tale of Saddam Hussein is far more terrifying. A man who sent even his own blood relatives to their deaths, simply because they dared to doubt him. A dictator who openly challenged America, declaring, "You cannot defeat me." And then the world witnessed his ultimate fate. Have you ever heard of a school where children were taught to fire grenades? In Saddam's Iraq, this was a chilling reality. A man once used by the CIA in their covert schemes, only to be later branded as the world's #1 enemy. Saddam's true power wasn't in his weapons, but in his mind, a mind that held Iraq in an iron grip for decades. The story of his secret bunkers remains classified as top secret in CIA documents to this day. And when he was hanged, did he truly die, or was something concealed? Because what happened behind the cameras that night remains a mystery. This isn't just the biography of a dictator, it's the shadow of a regime whose impact lingers even after his death. So, let's peel back the layers of a story. Drenched in suspense, conspiracy, and the poison of power, this is the complete story of Saddam Hussein. One you've never read in books, presented by NTP Justice. In a mosque in Baghdad, a Quran was placed, remarkable not for its ink but for being written in blood. And not just any blood, it was the blood of Iraq's former president, Saddam Hussein. As bizarre as it sounds, it's true. Saddam had an entire Quran written with his own blood. In 1997, he decided to undertake this project, donating his blood over 2 years. About 500 milliliters were drawn weekly, and a professional calligrapher used it to transcribe the holy text. This was no simple task. Writing a 600-page Quran with blood required special techniques. When completed, it was displayed with pride in a Baghdad mosque, hailed as a symbol of Saddam's devotion. Yet, for some, it was a religious sacrilege. Critics called it an insult to Islam, questioning whether writing the Quran in blood was permissible. Others dismissed it as religious hypocrisy and a propaganda stunt. They argued that after the Gulf War tarnished Saddam's image, he orchestrated this act to reinvent himself as a pious leader. When the US invaded Iraq in 2003, the fate of this blood-written Quran became a mystery. Some say it was removed from the mosque. Others believe it was hidden in a secret location. There are even claims it was destroyed during the war. This tale reveals Saddam's dual nature, a man ready to shed his blood for faith, yet a ruler whose cruelty was known worldwide. Saddam's life was filled with such peculiarities. He even turned missiles into during the 1991 Gulf War, when Israel was not involved. Saddam did something that grabbed global attention. He launched Scud missiles at Tel Aviv and Haifa. Though the attacks caused minimal damage, killing a few dozen and destroying some buildings, they created a political earthquake. This was Saddam's calculated move. He hoped Israel would retaliate, angering Arab nations allied with the US and fracturing the coalition. But America persuaded Israel to stay calm. The episode made Saddam a hero in the Arab world. In Palestine and other Muslim countries, people cheered, saying, "Look, someone is finally standing up to Israel." But the story doesn't end there. At the site where the missiles were launched, Saddam built a grand mosque, named ul-Marek, meaning Mother of All Battles. This mosque was unique, with 4 towering minarets designed to resemble Scud missiles, a bizarre fusion of religion and war. Saddam called it a symbol of Arab pride and strength. Its inauguration was a grand affair. People said it wasn't just a mosque but a testament to Iraq's defiance. Time, however, changes everything. In 2003, when the US invaded Iraq, The mosque was damaged. Today, it stands in ruins, a relic of an era when a dictator transformed missiles into Saddam's downfall began, not with America but with Iran. In 1980, he made a decision that pushed Iraq toward ruin. He attacked Iran, sparking the Iranian War, which lasted 8 years. Saddam believed Iran, weakened by its Islamic revolution, would collapse easily. He was wrong. The war devastated both nations, killing millions, destroying cities, and burying Iraq in debt. After the war, Iraq was in shambles. Oil revenue couldn't offset the destruction and debt. Saddam needed a new war to restore his reputation and revive Iraq's power. This led to another catastrophic mistake: the invasion of Kuwait in 1990. Claiming Kuwait was historically part of Iraq and accusing it of undermining oil prices, Saddam's forces overran the country in hours. But this time, he miscalculated. The world turned against him. The United Nations imposed crippling sanctions, and in 1991, a US-led coalition launched Operation Desert Storm, liberating Kuwait and crushing Iraq's military. The sanctions turned life in Iraq into a nightmare. Medicine and food were scarce. Children died of hunger. Yet Saddam clung to power. Throughout the 1990s, Iraq's condition worsened under UN sanctions. People starved and diseases spread, but Saddam's ego remained unshaken. He wanted the world to see him as invincible. After the 9/11 attacks in 2001, the global mood shifted. America declared war on terrorism, and Saddam became a target. In 2003, the US claimed he possessed weapons of mass destruction, a claim later proven false. By March 2003, American forces captured Baghdad, and Saddam was ousted. He went into hiding, moving through Iraq's alleys, villages, and caves. In December 2003, US troops found him in a small cave near The image of a bearded, disheveled Saddam, exhausted and defeated, went viral. This was not the powerful dictator the world once knew. In 2005, Saddam faced trial for crimes against humanity, war crimes, and genocide. The trial was long, with the world watching a once mighty man plead for his life. On December 30, 2006, Saddam was hanged. A leaked video of his execution showed him appearing fearless, chanting Allahu Akbar in his final moments. The footage sparked global controversy. Some saw it as justice, others believed America had destroyed a nation to settle a personal vendetta. We leave the judgment to you. But one question lingers. Was Saddam a poet or a butcher? It may surprise you, but this duality defines his story. Saddam was a man who instilled terror, yet wrote poetry and love stories. His personality seemed to house two souls, a tender writer and a heartless ruler. Saddam wrote several novels, the most famous being Zabiba and the King, a love story between a village girl and a king, said to reflect his own life. His books were widely read in Iraq, distributed in schools and colleges. He portrayed himself as a cultured, intellectual leader who loved art and adorned Baghdad with grand structures. Yet, this was the same man who ordered the deaths of thousands of opponents, imprisoned countless others, and used chemical weapons in Halabia. While he wrote a Quran in his blood, he also took lives out of fear. This duality, a literary king and a ruthless dictator, makes Saddam a mysterious and terrifying figure. Perhaps he was both, and that's why his story feels unfinished. The question remains: was he a sensitive writer or a cruel tyrant? After Saddam's death, many hoped for peace in Iraq, but the opposite happened. Iraq descended into chaos and violence. Under Saddam's iron rule, Shia, Sunni, and Kurdish communities coexisted, albeit through fear. His death unleashed sectarian tensions. Shia-Sunni violence erupted, and terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda, and later, ISIS took root. By 2014, ISIS controlled large parts of Iraq, committing atrocities in cities like Mosul. Thousands were killed, and millions displaced. Saddam's supporters argue his regime brought stability, uniting Iraq through his cruelty. Critics counter that his policies sowed the seeds of today's chaos, fueling resentment among Shia and Kurds that exploded after his fall. Iraq remains unstable today. Corruption and unemployment plague the nation, and sectarian divides weaken it further. Some Iraqis, especially those who prospered under Saddam, still remember him fondly. Others cannot forgive his brutality. Saddam's death offers a lesson. The misuse of power is catastrophic. His story may be over, but questions linger. Was he a revolutionary who defied the West and Israel, or a dictator who crushed his own people? His life teaches us that power is a flame warming in the right hands, but destructive in the wrong ones. Saddam's legacy endures. Some weep for him. Others celebrate his demise. One thing is certain. His name will echo in history, remembered with pride by some, and hatred by others. That duality makes his story extraordinary. The final chapter, a suspenseful end. Saddam Hussein's greatest complexity was his belief that he was not just Iraq's leader, but the champion of the entire Arab world. He saw himself as the heir to Saladin, the 12th century hero who liberated Jerusalem from the Crusaders. Saddam dreamed of uniting Arab nations into a single, powerful entity to stand against forces like America and Israel. But the methods he chose led to the destruction of his own vision. His grand idea was Pan-Arabism, a unified Arab nation. This belief drove him to claim Kuwait as part of Iraq, arguing it was a British plot to cut Iraq off from the sea. Yet, this ambition isolated him globally. By invading Kuwait, he alienated the very Arab nations he hoped to unite. Interestingly, Saddam portrayed himself as an Islamic leader, yet he ran a secular regime. Under his rule, Iraqi women had the freedom to work, girls attended schools and colleges, and education was among the best in the Arab world. Iraq's healthcare and infrastructure were exemplary, but his military and political decisions were so reckless that they plunged the country into war and ruin. Another enigmatic aspect of his rule was his intelligence network. Saddam built a spy system rivaling the Soviet KGB or Nazi Gestapo. He distrusted everyone. Informants infiltrated schools, offices, and even mosques. A single word against the regime could lead to disappearance by morning. His intelligence agency, Mukhabarat, imprisoned or killed thousands without trial. Saddam spared no one, not even his family. When his son-in-law Hussein Kamel fled to Jordan and spoke to Western powers, he was lured back with promises of forgiveness only to be executed. Trust had no place in Saddam's regime. Fear was its foundation. As sanctions tightened in the 1990s, that fear weakened. The Iraqi people starved. Children suffered from malnutrition, and hospitals ran out of medicine. A nation once at the forefront of education and health became one of the world's poorest. This suffering sparked anger, slowly turning into rebellion. When the US invaded in 2003, Saddam's army collapsed quickly. Iraqi soldiers lacked morale and trust. Baghdad fell in weeks, and Saddam's fortress crumbled. The invasion didn't just topple his regime, it shook Iraq's very foundations. What followed was chaos. Bombings swept cities. Suicide attacks became routine, and American convoys were constant targets. Shia and Sunni communities divided, marking the start of what Iraqis call the gates of hell. The power vacuum after Saddam's fall gave rise to terrorism, Al-Qaeda and later ISIS emerged, staining cities like Baghdad, Mosul, and Fallujah with blood. The atrocities against Yazidis and other minorities became some of history's darkest chapters. People began to wonder, was Saddam's tyranny better than this carnage? By 2014, ISIS controlled vast swaths of Iraq. Many of Saddam's former officers joined them, believing it was their path back to power. This showed that Saddam's mentality, fear violence, and control still lingered. Saddam's story feels like that of a fictional character. He was a dictator who saw himself as a great warrior, a poet who wrote of love and sacrifice, a tyrant who took thousands of lives, a visionary who dreamed of Arab unity, and a mad king who wrote a Quran in his blood. His life will remain in history as a warning of what happens when power consumes a man. In the end, even he returned to dust. The execution, December 29, 2006, while the world prepared for New Year's celebrations, a different scene unfolded in a shuttered government building in Baghdad. Men in black, faces masked, gathered with a rope in hand. Before an old camera mounted on the wall stood the man once called the leader of the Arabs, Saddam Hussein. The US had captured him in 2003, but an Iraqi court sentenced him to death for the 1982 massacre of 148 Shias in the verdict. Execution by hanging, set for the morning of December 30th. This wasn't just a dictator's execution, it was the end of an era defined by oil, power, and tyranny. That night, Saddam was taken from his cell, dressed in black, clutching a Quran. American soldiers handed him to Iraqi authorities. He was driven in a white vehicle to the gallows. His face showed no fear or regret, just an eerie calm. The execution room was stark, narrow, and folds. A wooden staircase led to a thick noose. Shia militia slogans adorned the walls. The crowd jeered, shouting, "Long live Muqtada, and go to hell, Saddam." Saddam remained silent, flipping through his Quran as he stepped toward the noose. When asked for his final words, he said, "There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger." The lever was pulled. Saddam's body swung in the air. The snap of his neck echoed, and silence fell. The dictator, who once filled Baghdad with his statues, now dangled from a nameless rope. His body was taken to Tikrit and buried secretly, but his death didn't bring peace. It opened a new chapter of chaos. Violence erupted across Iraq immediately. Shia Sunni riots set the country ablaze. Suicide bombings, mosque attacks, and streets littered with bodies became the norm. Saddam's execution brought not peace, but more war. The US believed removing a dictator would usher in democracy. Instead, the power vacuum fueled terrorism. The era that followed became known as post-Saddam chaos. People began to question, was Saddam's regime better than this? At least then, schools functioned, hospitals operated, and women walked freely. Now, Mosul, Kirkuk, and Baghdad faced daily bombings. Parents feared sending children to school. Iraq fractured into three-part Kurdish, Shia, and Sunni. Worst of all, ISIS was rising. By 2014, ISIS seized much of Iraq, showing the world how terrorism could crush humanity. Many of Saddam's former soldiers joined them, driven by vengeance. Ironically, Saddam's death didn't weaken his enemies, emboldened those like him. The world saw his execution in a blurry video, shouting crowds and a man swinging from a rope. But it wasn't just one man's death, it was the death of a nation's innocence. Today, Saddam's posters still appear in parts of Iraq. Some call him a hero, others a devil. What's undeniable is that Saddam Hussein showed the world what happens when power's intoxication crosses all limits. burning not just a ruler but an entire civilization. After Sodom, a shattered Middle East, the void left by Sodom's death. NTP Justice, Iraq. It shook the entire Middle East. What the US and its allies called a new beginning was, in reality, a wave of destruction and anarchy. From 2007 to 2011, Iraq endured its darkest years. Weekly bombings claimed hundreds of lives. Blood-stained streets and bullet marks scarred walls. American troops were present but became targets themselves. Sunnis and Shias clashed openly, as the religious and ethnic tensions suppressed under Sodom erupted into full-scale war. Power passed to Nouri al-Maliki, a Shia leader fueled by vengeance. He systematically purged Sunni officials from Sodom's era, arresting or disappearing them without trial. This environment sowed the seeds of ISIS. In 2011, the US withdrew its forces, hoping for peace. It was a grave mistake. Pulling out was like a doctor abandoning a patient mid-surgery. By 2013, a new name emerged in Iraq and Syria: ISIS, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. ISIS was unique because it included former members of Sodom's army, intelligence, and administration. Cast aside as villains by the US, they returned with modern weapons, strategies, and technology, becoming terrorism's new face. ISIS captured Mosul north of Baghdad, shocking the world. They didn't just defeat government forces, they seized their tanks, weapons, and ammunition. Their leader, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, declared an Islamic caliphate, proclaiming himself caliph. Baghdadi, once held in a US prison camp, had planned his organization there, reportedly saying, "We'll meet again in the next war." Sodom's Iraq, once a strong nation, was now under ISIS control. Schools, hospitals, and colleges were theirs. They confined women to homes, massacred minorities, and enslaved Yazidi girls. Their brutality was broadcast live online. People began to remember Sodom. Yes, he was a dictator, but he hadn't let Iraq fracture like this. Iraq split into three: Kurds in the north, Sunni ISIS in the center, and Shia militias in the south. Everyone fought for power, speaking through weapons. By 2015, the world debated whether removing Sodom was the right choice. Had the US and its allies merely eliminated a dictator, or had they destroyed a nation? Iran began meddling in Iraqi politics, arming and training Shia groups. Meanwhile, Sunni extremists received funding from Saudi Arabia. Iraq became a proxy war battlefield, with two major Islamic powers fighting through it. A nation once leading in science, technology, and education became a battleground for Shia-Sunni, Iran-Saudi, and US-ISIS conflicts. Sodom's spirit lingered. His soldiers, his legacy of tyranny, and his decisions echoed through the chaos. People started saying that Sodom's rule, though harsh, was better than the hell that followed. The suspenseful end, the final chapter of Saddam Hussein's story, leaves questions unanswered. By 2017, ISIS was largely defeated. The US, Russia, Iran, and Kurds obliterated their strongholds. Mosul was liberated, Baghdadi was killed, and a fragile veneer of peace settled over Iraq. But the truth was darker. Iraq's youth born amid war, raised with bomb blasts as their lullabies, who lost fathers to battles and saw mothers live in terror, began to ask, do we need another strong leader to protect us from foreign powers? Was Sodom evil, or was our understanding incomplete? In Baghdad's streets, walls bore new graffiti. Sodom was better than this hell. Some of Sodom's old soldiers, once ready to die for him, hold secret meetings. Rumors swirl of a new group forming, one that seeks to revive Sodom's ideology with fresh faces and modern methods. In Iraq's parliament, leaders emerge saying, "We don't want dictatorship, but we need a strong system to answer our enemies." Is this new era summoning another Sodom? Was his death truly the end, or just the beginning of a new suspense? When a dictator dies, burying his body is easy, but his fear, his ideology, his system they live on for years, in books, in leaders' speeches, and in the dreams of the young. This is the most dangerous twist in Sodom's story. Even after his death, his fear and influence still pulse through Eric's heart. Will another dictator rise? Or will Eric learn from its past and move forward? These questions hang in the air. Only time will answer. The end, presented by NTP Justice, where every truth is a new story.